I lost my house. I lost my marriage. I slept in my car while the man who ruined me slept in my bed. That was the moment I stopped believing in fairness and started believing in patience. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32, born in Indiana, raised to trust people who smiled and promised forever. For 10 years, I was married to Mark Carter, a man everyone admired. He was polite, successful, and careful in the way only dangerous men are. He never yelled. He never hit. He just made sure that when he was done with me, I had nowhere left to stand. When the divorce ended, the judge spoke kindly. The lawyer shook my hand. Mark wished me well, like we were old coworkers. The house was in his name, the savings were gone. Even the car I drove for years was leased through his business. I walked out with one suitcase and a purse that felt lighter than my future. That night, I parked behind a closed supermarket in Columbus, Ohio, and tried to sleep in the driver's seat. The air smelled like wet asphalt. My coat wasn't warm enough. Every sound made my heart jump. I kept thinking someone would knock on the window and tell me to leave, like I didn't already know I didn't belong anywhere. Morning came too fast. I washed my face in a gas station bathroom and practiced smiling in the mirror, telling myself this was temporary. I applied for jobs until my phone battery dropped to red. Overqualified, they said, or they didn't say anything at all. By the third day, hope felt heavier than hunger. I sat on a bench in a public park watching strangers live normal lives. Families laughed. Dogs pulled on leashes. Nobody looked at me twice. That's when a man sat down beside me. He didn't ask permission. He didn't crowd me either. He just sat there like he belonged. "You're not resting," he said. "You're waiting." I stood up immediately, ready to leave. "I'm fine." "People who are fine don't sleep in their cars," he replied calmly. I froze. He nodded toward the parking lot where my car sat, blankets visible through the back window. There was no pity in his eyes, just certainty. "My name is Daniel Reed, and no, I'm not here to cause trouble." I laughed under my breath. That's what trouble usually says. He smiled slightly. "You were married. You lost everything, and the person who did it walked away clean." My chest tightened. "You don't know anything about me." "I know men like him," Daniel said, "and women like you." I should have walked away. Instead, I sat back down. "What do you want?" I asked. He took his time answering, like he was measuring the moment. "If I offered you a way out," he said, "would you take it?" I shook my head. "There's no such thing." "There is," he said, "but it comes with conditions." He turned to face me fully then. His voice stayed even, but his words landed hard. 1 year. You live in my house, you follow my rules, and when the year ends, you leave with $5 million. I laughed out loud. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to consider it," he replied, "because you don't have better options." I stared at him, anger and hope fighting inside me. "What's in it for you?" I asked. He leaned back and looked at the sky. "I build systems," he said, "systems that expose people who believe they're untouchable." My heart started racing. "If I say yes," I said slowly, "am I allowed to get even?" Daniel finally smiled, and it wasn't kind. "You won't need permission," he said. "You'll learn how." I looked at my car, at everything I had left in the world, then back at him. "I'm listening," I said. And that was how my revenge began. Quietly, patiently, and exactly where no one expected it. Daniel's house sat at the end of a quiet road outside the city, surrounded by trees that were too thick to see through. It wasn't flashy. No gates, no guards, just a long driveway and a home that looked calm enough to be harmless. That alone made me uneasy. I followed my car up the drive, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Every instinct told me this was a mistake. Strangers didn't offer $5 million for nothing. Men like Daniel didn't invite broken women into their homes without a reason. I parked beside a black SUV that looked like it cost more than my entire past life. Daniel waited on the porch. "You can leave at any time," he said as I stepped out. "The door won't lock you in." "That's comforting," I replied. Inside, the house was clean, quiet, and controlled. No family photos, no clutter. Everything had a place, and nothing felt personal. It was the kind of home someone built to think clearly, not to feel. He handed me a glass of water and motioned toward a chair at the kitchen table. "We need rules," he said. I sat. I figured. "You live here for 1 year. You don't bring guests. You don't post about me. You don't ask questions until I say it's time. You follow instructions exactly." "And the money?" I asked. "Held in escrow," he said. "A lawyer you choose will confirm it. 5 million. Clean. Text. Yours at the end of 12 months. I watched his face for signs of lying. There were none. "What happens if I leave early?" I asked. "Then you leave with nothing," he replied. "And no one stops you." I took a breath. "What happens if I stay?" Daniel leaned forward. "Then you become untouchable." That word stuck with me. He showed me the room I'd stay in. Simple, comfortable, secure. When he closed the door behind me, I sat on the bed and finally let myself shake. This was real. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every sound made me tense, but nothing happened. No locked doors, no surprises, just silence. In the morning, Daniel handed me a folder. "Your first lesson," he said. Inside were documents, bank records, corporate filings, names I didn't recognize, except one. Mark Carter. My throat went dry. "I said this wasn't about my ex," I said. "It's not," Daniel replied calmly. "He's just useful." I flipped through the pages. Mark's real estate company, hidden accounts, shady partnerships, things I never knew existed. "He stole from me," I whispered. "Yes," Daniel said, "and from others." My hands clenched. "Why show me this?" "Because revenge without control becomes chaos, and chaos gets people caught." He slid another folder toward me. Inside were articles about companies collapsing, executives arrested, lives ruined. Quietly, legally, completely. "This is what I do," Daniel said. "I don't destroy people with force. I let them destroy themselves." For the first time, I understood the offer. This wasn't about living with him. It was about learning how power really worked. Days passed. Then weeks. Daniel taught me how money moved, how influence hid behind charities and shell companies, how reputations were built on lies people were too afraid to question. I listened. I learned. I stayed quiet. And slowly, I stopped feeling like a victim. One afternoon, Daniel looked at me and said, "Your ex thinks you're still sleeping in your car." I smiled for the first time in months. "Good," I said. That night, I checked Mark's social media from a fake account. New girlfriend, new house, new smile. He had no idea what was coming, and neither did anyone else, because the woman he broke no longer existed, and the one he created was patient enough to wait. Daniel didn't wake me with alarms or schedules. He believed in routines that grew quietly, the kind that changed you without asking permission, Every morning, the house came alive at the same time. Coffee brewed at 6. Lights in the study turned on. By the time I walked downstairs, Daniel was already working, calm and focused, like the world never surprised him. He handed me a laptop on the third morning. "No internet history," he said. "No personal accounts. This stays here." I nodded, feeling the weight of it before I even opened it. Inside were files, spreadsheets, timelines, connections that looked harmless on the surface. Daniel taught me how to read between lines most people ignored. A donation here, a delayed payment there. Patterns that meant nothing alone, but everything together. "This is how people hide," he said, "and this is how they fall." We spent hours reviewing case studies, CEOs who vanished from headlines overnight, politicians who resigned for personal reasons, businesses that collapsed without drama. Daniel never raised his voice. He never smiled when describing ruin. For him, it wasn't emotional, it was precise. At night, I thought about Mark, about how he took control of our finances slowly, explaining things in a way that made me feel stupid for asking questions, about how he smiled in court, already knowing the outcome. I began to see him differently now, not powerful, just careless. Weeks passed. I learned how to trace money without touching it, how to let others expose themselves, how to wait. Patience, Daniel said, was the sharpest weapon. One evening, he placed a new file in front of me. "This one is yours." I opened it. Mark Carter. Updated. New business partners, offshore accounts, a charity foundation used as a funnel. The same tricks Daniel had taught me, except Mark was sloppy. My hands trembled. Why is he so exposed? "Because he believes you're gone," Daniel said, "and because people like him always repeat themselves." I swallowed. "What do you want me to do?" "For now," Daniel replied, "nothing." That was the hardest instruction of all. Instead, he had me observe, watch patterns, track movements, learn how small changes created big waves. I followed Mark's deals like shadows, seeing every corner he cut. Then, Daniel introduced the first test. A minor investor, a man Mark barely remembered. Daniel had me contact him using a false identity. Just questions at first, curiosity disguised as opportunity. Within days, the man talked. Not because I pushed, but because I listened. That's when it clicked. Mark didn't just underestimate me, he underestimated everyone. The more I learned, the colder I became. Not angry, not bitter, focused. One afternoon, Daniel watched me close the laptop and nodded. "You're ready." "For what?" "To stop being invisible." He handed me a new phone. "Change your name," he said. "Change your voice. Change how you move." That night, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building something, and Mark was standing right in the center of it, smiling, unaware that the ground beneath him had already started to crack. The first time I stepped back into the world, no one recognized me. That was the point. Daniel didn't believe in disguises. He believed in distance. Change how you speak, change what you value. People only see what they expect to see, and they expected Emily Carter to be broken, quiet, and gone. So I became someone else. Not with a new face, but with a new presence. I started attending small industry events under a consulting name Daniel helped set up. Nothing flashy, no big entrances, just enough to be noticed without being remembered. I listened more than I spoke. When I did speak, I asked questions that made people feel important. Men talked. They always did. Every conversation fed into a map Daniel was building. Names connected, weak points appeared. It felt strange, watching power up close and realizing how fragile it was. Then came the night Mark noticed me. It was at a real estate charity dinner in downtown Columbus. I wasn't supposed to go. Daniel had warned me not to rush this step, but the invitation landed on my desk like a challenge. "You're thinking emotionally," he said. "I'm thinking clearly," I replied. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. 1 hour, no confrontation. I wore a simple black dress, nothing dramatic. Confidence did the work for me now. Mark stood near the bar, laughing too loudly, his arm around his new girlfriend. He looked healthy, comfortable, like a man who believed the past stayed buried. I felt nothing. That surprised me most. I watched him the way Daniel taught me, not as a victim, but as a case study. He was careless with his words, proud of his deals, eager to impress anyone who looked important. Eventually, his eyes landed on me. I saw the confusion first, the pause, the slow recognition that something felt familiar but didn't fit. He approached, smiling politely. "Have we met?" he asked. "No, I don't think so." He studied my face, searching, failing. "I'm Mark," he said. "I know," I replied lightly. "Your reputation precedes you." That did it. His posture changed. He straightened. We talked for less than 5 minutes, about the market, about expansion, about risk. I let him speak. I asked the right questions. Before he left, he handed me his card. "Maybe we should talk," he said. I smiled. Maybe. When I walked away, my hands were steady. Back at the house, Daniel listened as I told him everything. "He didn't recognize you," he said. "Good." "He will," I replied. "Eventually," Daniel agreed, "but by then it won't matter." Days later, the email came. Mark wanted a meeting, an opportunity, he called it. Daniel read the message and smiled faintly. "He's inviting you inside. That's always the beginning of the end." I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of what I'd become. The woman he discarded was gone, and the one he was about to trust would be the reason he lost everything. Mark didn't hesitate. He set the meeting at his downtown office, confident as ever. He had no idea I wasn't the same woman who had signed away everything, who had sat silently while he took control of my life. He didn't know I had spent months learning his patterns, his weaknesses, and his arrogance. I arrived early, dressed professionally, calm and controlled. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. Observe. Never react. Let them make the mistakes. Mark greeted me with his usual charm. "Emily? I mean, your consulting name," he said, clearly trying to place me. He led me into his office, overlooking the city skyline, as if the view made him untouchable. We sat. I listened. I asked pointed questions disguised as curiosity. I nodded at his explanations. Every brag, every slip, every casual mention of partnerships and accounts went into the mental map I had been building for months. I noted the offhand comments about investors, the small lies about earnings, the shortcuts he had taken that would eventually catch him. "You've changed," he said finally, squinting at me. "You seem different." I had to adapt, voice steady. Life teaches you that quickly. He laughed lightly, not realizing how true my words were and how dangerous. Over the next hour, he unknowingly revealed more than I had dared hope. Emails he forwarded, contracts he casually mentioned, and conversations with partners he assumed were private. Every detail was a thread, and I had the patience to weave them together into a rope that would eventually pull everything from beneath him. When the meeting ended, Mark extended his hand. I shook it firmly. He didn't see the subtle smirk I allowed myself. Not yet. Back in the car, I called Daniel. I summarized everything. "Perfect," he said. "He's arrogant, careless, ready." I exhaled, letting a part of the tension release. "When do we act?"
Daniel didn't answer immediately. "Patience," he said. "You've set the stage. Now you watch. People like him destroy themselves. We just make sure we're watching." That evening, I reviewed Mark's accounts again. Hidden transfers, shell corporations, unreported partnerships, legal loopholes. If I moved carefully, all of it could collapse without anyone suspecting me. But Daniel had warned me, revenge isn't about instant gratification. It's about precision, timing, and letting pride do most of the work. Days later, Mark's arrogance continued to feed me. He boasted about a new investor, careless with names, phone numbers, and promises. I traced every detail, noting the small mistakes he made that he thought were invisible. It became intoxicating. Not the money, though $5 million at the end of the year was already a thought that made my heart race, but the power, the certainty that he was walking toward a trap he didn't even know existed. One night, I sat in Daniel's study with a folder of documents, emails, and records. I traced connections, wrote notes, and visualized the collapse. Every partner, every ally, every person who trusted Mark blindly would feel the consequences of his carelessness. I realized then that this wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And unlike the courtrooms and lawyers I had once relied on, this was unstoppable. Mark had underestimated me. Every move he made reinforced my strategy. Every smile, every boast, every moment of pride became another brick in the cage I was building around him. I closed the folder and leaned back in the chair, letting a small, cold smile cross my face. He had no idea who I had become, and by the time he realized, it would be too late.
Things didn't fall apart for Mark all at once. They never do. Collapse begins with doubt, not disaster. It started with a phone call he ignored. Then another he pretended not to notice. I was sitting across from him at a cafe when his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and turned it face down on the table. "Everything okay?" I asked casually. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just noise." But it wasn't noise. It was the sound of cracks spreading. Behind the scenes, the pressure was building exactly as Daniel predicted. An investor asked for documentation Mark couldn't produce. A bank delayed a transfer that usually cleared within hours. One partner quietly pulled out of a deal without explanation. Mark started talking more. Nervous people always do. "They're overreacting," he said one afternoon. "People get scared for no reason." I nodded, letting him convince himself. At home, Daniel tracked everything. He never celebrated early. He just watched the numbers shift, the trust erode, the timeline tighten. "This is the danger phase," he said. "He still thinks he's in control." Mark called me late one night, his voice tight. "I need a favor," he said. "Just advice." The word almost made me laugh. I listened while he explained a situation that wasn't supposed to exist. Accounts temporarily frozen, a compliance review he claimed was routine. "Should I be worried?" he asked. I paused just long enough. "No," I said gently. "These things pass if you stay calm." He exhaled in relief. That was the moment I understood real power. Not forcing someone into a mistake, but letting them walk deeper into it. A week later, the first article appeared. Small, buried in the business section. Questions about one of Mark's developments. No accusations, just curiosity. He stormed into our next meeting angry. "Someone's digging," he said, "trying to hurt me." "People get jealous," I replied. "Success attracts attention." He believed me because he wanted to. Daniel looked at me that night and said, "You're ready for the final move." I felt something tighten in my chest, not fear, but gravity. The next morning, everything accelerated. Auditors, lawyers, emails marked urgent. Partners stopped returning calls. Mark's girlfriend locked her social media and disappeared.
He called me again, desperate this time. Emily, he said. He used my real name without realizing it. I smiled. Yes, I replied. Silence. I know you, he whispered. Yes, I said calmly. You do. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he just sounded small. You planned this, he said. No, I replied. You did. I just watched. When the call ended, my hands were steady. Daniel closed the laptop and nodded once. It's done. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in a year. Mark lost his business within days. Investigations followed, lawsuits piled up. No public scandal, just a quiet erasure, the kind he'd given me. I didn't attend his downfall. I didn't need to. Because revenge isn't about watching someone fall, it's about standing tall when they do.
The day it was all over, I woke up before sunrise, as I had for months now. The house was quiet. Daniel had already left for work, leaving instructions for the day: review the final reports, confirm transfers, and enjoy the view. I walked to the balcony, looking out over the city. Everything glowed softly in the morning light. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not because I had money, not because I had power, but because I had survived, and I had won. Mark's empire was gone, quietly dismantled. No headlines, no chaos for the public to see, but to him, the collapse was total. Every partner, every investor, every person who had trusted him blindly was now part of a web he couldn't escape. He never saw me coming, not fully, not the way I had learned, trained, and become someone else, while he assumed I was invisible. I sat at the dining table, sipping coffee, thinking of all the months it had taken. The learning, the patience, the quiet observation. Every small detail had mattered. Every slip he made had mattered. And every moment of restraint I had practiced had mattered. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, it wasn't Mark. It was a courier with an envelope. Inside, the legal confirmation that $5 million had been transferred to an account I controlled. Clean, legal, untouchable. I smiled. I could have spent it on a house, on travel, on indulgence, but I didn't. I had learned something more important than money: control, freedom, safety, power. I packed my bag and drove to the city, not to buy a new life, but to start one on my own terms. No fear, no debts, no one who could dictate my worth. At a cafe downtown, I watched people hurry past, unaware that I had changed the game, that the woman they might have overlooked had outmaneuvered someone they all admired. I checked my phone. No calls from Mark, no messages, nothing. Perfect.